alibi. So he has no alibi. Could he have killed her? Maybe. Maybe. Okay, the last person. Who is Saul Sheen?
Just
Oh, the one left. Okay, I'll do Saul for him. Okay, so the name is Saul Sheen.
对啊，就很多双手跑掉了。
Okay, Saul Sheen. And Saul Sheen was a teacher. He was a teacher at the school. And what did he think of Miss M? Miss M was his mom. Saul Sheen's mom was Miss M. His mama was Miss M. And when Saul Sheen was very little, his mom gave him away. She didn't want him. She gave him away to somebody else. And when he grew up, he found her. So Saul knows Miss M is his mom. But he wants to know who is his dad. And he asks Miss M, but she won't tell him. It's a secret. And Saul is angry because he wants to know who is his dad. So is that a motive?
Yeah.
Yes. Even though she's his mom, it is a motive. Okay, and Saul, when he heard the scream, he was looking for Mr. Green. And he knocked on Mr. Green's door, but there was no answer. Mr. Green said that he was in his room on the computer, right? But when Saul Sheen knocked on the door, there was nobody. So, very strange, right? So, is there an alibi? No. There is a clue. What's the clue? The photo. The photo of Saul. Okay? So, who thinks it was Saul who did it? Who thinks Saul Sheen killed Miss M? You think? Who thinks Louis King?
他们觉得谁杀了他？
Louis King? Anybody think Louis King? What about Ivan? Ivan Williams. Ivan Williams? You guys think Ivan Williams? What about Mr. Green? Mr. Green, maybe?
他是谁？
You think it's Ivan? Okay. So, I'll tell you who did it in just a second here. Okay. Mr. Green is Saul's father. Mr. Green is Sheen's dad. He and Miss M had a relationship in college. So, Mr. Green and Miss M in college were boyfriend and girlfriend. And Miss M had Saul. But she was in college. She was very young. So she gave Saul away.
他把它给别人养，给别人养，所以他还不知道他父亲是谁。
Miss M has always kept it a secret. So it was a secret. But after the last argument with Saul, she plans to tell him the truth. So she kept it a secret. She kept a secret from Sheen that Mr. Green was his dad. She didn't want Saul to know. But they had an argument, right? They had an argument. They were angry. Saul was angry with his mom. So his mom thought, oh, okay, I'll tell him. So she wants to tell tell Saul that Mr. Green is his dad. She wants to. She tells Mr. Green about her plan, and they argue. So Miss M tells Mr. Green she will tell Saul that Mr. Green is his dad. Everybody got it good? Okay? Lewis King overhears them. Lewis hears them arguing. Mr. Green is angry, and it is he who follows Miss M to the classroom and hits her over the head. It was Mr. Green. Mr. Green. He wasn't in his office when everyone heard the scream. That's why when Saul knocked on the door, he got no answer. So Mr. Green said he was in his office on the computer, but he wasn't. He was in the classroom, and he killed Miss M. So when Saul knocked on the door, there was no answer. So it was Mr. Green who did it. So what do we know about this mystery? So let's think about how we solve a mystery again. So, do we know how? How did it happen? How did Miss M die? How did she die? Miss M. How? She was hit on the head. So we know how. Hit on the head. So do we know? Yes. So we can check that off. Do we know when? When did it happen? 8:30 p.m. So we know when, so we can check this off. What about where? Where did it happen? School reunion. In a classroom. In a classroom at the school reunion. Okay, so we know where, so we can check that off. How, when, where. What about who? Who did it? Who did it? Mr. Green. Mr. Green murdered Miss M. So, Mr. Green, Miss M. So we know who. What about why? Why? They had an argument about their son, about Saul. And who was angry? Mr. Green. So we know why. So is this mystery finished? Do we know all of these? Yes, we know how. She was hit on the head. We know when. 8:30 p.m. We know where. At the classroom in a school reunion. We know who. Mr. Green killed Miss M. Why? They had an argument about their son, Saul, and Mr. Green was angry. So we can say, we know. So this mystery is finished. We know everything. So as detectives, what do we do when a mystery is finished? What do we do? what can we do? Because we know who did it. We go and arrest Mr. Green. So we go and grab Mr. Green and lock him up. Because we know who did it. And we know all these things. So in court, does everybody know court? You know when they say guilty or not guilty. When they say Mr. Green did it or didn't do it. We have all this information. So we know. And we can tell the judge. And the judge will say, Mr. Green, you are going to jail. Or Mr. Green, you're going to prison for how many years, or maybe his whole life. Because he hurt somebody, he killed somebody. So, as detectives, we learn things this way, by asking questions. Now, if I was a scientist, what would I look for? Would I ask questions? I'd use science, right? What type of science can you use? DNA, blood, skin, hair, fingerprints. So if I was a scientist or a crime scene investigator, or CSI, CSI uses science to use DNA, fingerprints, hair, and they pick it up and they scan it on a microscope and they see whose hair is that. So let's say Mr. Green killed Miss M and he had some of his hair on Miss M. A crime scene investigator, or CSI, they would take the hair and look at it through a microscope and see, oh, that's Mr. Green's hair. Or they'd see Mr. Green's fingerprints on her head or on the weapon. They'd see his fingerprints and say, these are Mr. Green's fingerprints. And they would know that way. So there's detectives who do the questions, and there's crime scene investigators, CSI, that look at science. So those are two ways to solve a mystery. So let's say, does everybody know what these are? This picture here. Does everybody know this picture? Do you guys know? Easter Island. Easter Island. So that's a mystery. How did those heads get moved? They're so heavy, right? So how did they get moved? If I was a detective, I'd ask how? How did it happen? When? Or where? Or who? Or why? So who moved those heads? Why did they build them? Where did the heads come from? And when? When in history did they get moved? And how could people push or pull or move them? So as a detective, I'd find these things. As a scientist, I would look at evidence or facts. I would look at the rocks. What type of rock? How heavy is the rock? What could you use to pull the rock? What could you use to move the rock? So as a scientist, I'd use physical things as a way to figure it out. As a detective, we'd use what we need to know to figure it out. Okay? So it's just a fun way to figure out mysteries and solve them. And it's a fun way way to learn English, because these questions, do we use them every day? Do you ask yourself every day, how did something happen? How can I finish my homework? How is my teacher late? Or why is my teacher late? Can we say who if somebody knocks on our door? Who is it? Who is at our door? Where? Oh, where's the bathroom? Where's the MRT? Where's something to eat? I'm hungry. Where? When? When is class? When does class end? What time is it? So we use these questions all the time. But we can also use them to solve mysteries. And when a mystery is solved, it's no longer a mystery. Okay? So let me see here. So what is, let me first get your, here, these cards. Get these cards first. Thank you. Thank you very much. So what other mysteries are there in the real world? What mysteries? Did everybody hear about the Malaysia, the plane? Do you guys know Malaysia? The plane that is gone, was gone. The Malaysia airplane that it just disappeared. Nobody knows where it is. Nobody knows how, when, what, who, why. That's a mystery, right? What other mysteries are there in the world? Are there any others? What about, let's see, I'll try to think of one. The Bermuda Triangle. The Bermuda Triangle. Why if you go into the ocean in the Bermuda Triangle, there's airplanes, boats, all sorts of things just vanish, gone, sunk into the bottom of the ocean. But why and how? And who disappeared? So it just doesn't make sense. It's a mystery. So mysteries are all over the world. Are there any mysteries in Taiwan?